My daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "We're doing you a favor by letting you stay." In my own house. My son nodded. "Mom, you should be grateful." I smiled and said nothing. The next morning, a man in a suit knocked on the door. When he introduced himself, my son's face went white and my daughter-in-law started crying. Because. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. We're doing you a favor by letting you stay. The words hung in the air of my kitchen, sharp and final like the click of a lock. The steam from the pot of collard greens on the stove seemed to freeze for a second. Chloe stood across from me, one hand on her hip, the other gripping the back of a chair at my oak table. My table. Her polished nails tapped against the wood. She was smiling, a tight, thin line that didn't reach her eyes. I set the wooden spoon down on the ceramic rest. The smell of smoked turkey and greens, a smell that had filled this house for 38 years, felt suddenly foreign. I looked from her face to my son's. Michael was staring at a crack in the tile floor he'd made with a toy truck when he was 7. He wouldn't meet my gaze. "A favor," I repeated. My voice was calm. It surprised even me. "Yes," Chloe said, her tone shifting to one of patient explanation. "This house is just too much for you, Alina. All these rooms, the stairs, the yard. Mike and I worry." I looked around my kitchen. The yellow curtains I'd sewn when Michael left for college. The photograph on the fridge of Marcus and me, grinning on the porch the day we paid off the mortgage. The slight wear on the linoleum near the sink, a groove made by 38 years of standing there washing dishes. It was not too much. It was everything. "We've been talking," Michael said, finally lifting his head. His eyes were pleading, but not with me, with the situation. "Chloe's right, Mom, it's not safe, and we could utilize the space better, start our family here." "You want to start your family," I said, "in my house." "Our house," Chloe corrected gently, as if reminding a child. "While you're still in it, I mean. We're not throwing you out. We're offering you a solution. You can keep the small bedroom at the back. It's cozy. And we'll handle all the upkeep, the bills. You won't have to lift a finger." I listened. I listened to the woman who had been in my home for 3 years tell me about coziness and solutions. I watched my son, a man I raised to look people in the eye, study the floor again. The humiliation was a cold, solid weight in my stomach, but beneath it, something else stirred. A clarity so sharp it was almost peaceful. "You want me to move my things to the back bedroom," I stated. "The master suite gets the morning sun," Chloe said, as if discussing the weather. "It would be perfect for a nursery eventually, and we need a proper home office. The guest room is ideal for that. Your current room, it's just too large for one person. All that clutter." She said clutter the way one might say garbage. My books, Marcus's old reading chair, the quilt my grandmother made. "I see," I said. Michael misinterpreted my silence for surrender. He took a step forward, relief softening his face. "See, Mom, it's practical, it's for your own good. You can relax. We'll take care of everything." I looked at him, his father's brow, my mother's chin. I saw the little boy who used to build forts in this living room and the man who now saw me as a management problem. The cold weight spread, but the clarity remained, hardening into a plan I didn't yet know the shape of, only its purpose. "When would this happen?" I asked. Chloe's smile became more genuine. "No time like the present. We could help you move your essentials this weekend. We can sort through the rest later. Some of the older furniture might need to go to make the space feel more open." I nodded slowly. "This weekend." "It's really the best way," she said, her mission accomplished. She patted my arm as she walked past me to get a glass of water from my sink. "You'll thank us later. Living in a big, empty house all alone, it's not good for you. We're family. We're doing you a favor." She walked out, her heels clicking a confident rhythm down the hall. Michael lingered for a moment. He opened his mouth, closed it, then gave me a weak smile. "It'll be okay, Mom, you'll see." Then he followed his wife. I stood at the stove. The greens were simmering again. I turned off the burner. The silence that descended was different from the quiet of an empty house I was accustomed to. This silence was charged, violated. It was the silence after a door has been kicked in. I did not cry. I did not rage. I walked into the living room and sat in Marcus's chair. The leather was cracked, molded to the shape of him, then to the shape of my grief, and now to the shape of me. I looked at the walls. Every scuff, every nail hole held a memory we had chosen, Marcus and I the watercolor from our trip to Savannah, the framed wedding invitation, the slightly crooked shelf Michael had built in shop class. Chloe saw clutter. Michael saw a burden. I saw a life that was now under hostile occupation. The favor was the key that turned the lock, not in their favor but in mine. It freed me. From hope, from accommodation, from the desperate, lonely desire to keep my child close at any cost. The cost had just been stated, clearly and without remorse. My dignity, my home, my history. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a chess player who sees the board clearly for the first time. My opponent had made an aggressive, arrogant move. She believed the game was won. She did not know I had been studying the rules of this particular game for decades longer than she had been alive. I got up from the chair. I went to the small desk in the corner, an old roll top that had been my father's. From a locked compartment, I took out a slender black address book. The pages were worn, the handwriting in it a mix of mine and Marcus's precise script. I flipped past the names of friends, past the number for the pharmacy, past the plumber. I found the name. Daniels Alastair, a business number written in Marcus's hand 20 years ago. Below it, in my newer pen, I had written *C, Daniels and Associates, Estate Law. I picked up the phone, a heavy cordless handset. I dialed the number. It rang twice. A professional, courteous voice answered. "C. Daniels and Associates, how may I direct your call?" "Alastair Daniels, please," I said. My voice was still calm, steady. "Tell him it's Alina Jenkins, Marcus Jenkins's widow. He's been expecting my call." As I waited to be connected, I looked out the window at my front yard. The azalea bushes Marcus planted were starting to bud. I would see them bloom this spring. I would see them bloom from my living room window, sitting in my husband's chair in my house. The line clicked. "Alina." His voice was warm, familiar, carrying the weight of years and shared history. "I've been waiting. Are you ready?" I watched Chloe's expensive car through the glass. "Yes, Alastair," I said, the first genuine smile of the evening touching my lips. It felt thin and new. "The favor has been offered. It's time." The line went dead with a soft click. I placed the handset back in its cradle on the desk. The house was quiet again, but the silence now had a different quality. It was the silence of a field after the first trench has been dug. I stood and walked back to the kitchen. The pot of greens was cool. I emptied it into a container, washed the pot, and put it away. Each movement was deliberate. I wiped the counters. I aligned the salt and pepper shakers. Order was a practice, a ritual to steady the hands for what came next. The next morning, I went to the hall closet and took out 3 cardboard boxes I had saved from the grocery store. I carried them down the hallway to my bedroom. Our bedroom. The large, sun-filled room Marcus and I had shared for 34 years. I did not start with the clothes in the closet or the items on the dresser. I went to the bookshelf. I took down the photograph albums one by one. The heavy, leather-bound one from our wedding. The simpler ones with plastic sleeves that held pictures of Michael as a baby, as a boy, as a graduate. I placed them carefully in the first box. Next were the books on my nightstand. A worn Bible, a collection of Langston Hughes poems, a historical novel with a bookmark halfway through. I packed them. I was placing a stack of sweaters into the second box when Chloe appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame, holding a mug of coffee. She watched me for a long moment. "I'm glad you're being sensible about this, Alina," she said. Her voice was sweet, satisfied. "It really is for the best, a fresh start for everyone." I nodded, folding a gray cardigan. "A fresh start." "Mike was worried you'd be upset. I told him you'd see reason. You're a practical woman." She took a sip of coffee. "Do you need any help?" "No, thank you," I said. "I know where everything goes." She lingered, her eyes scanning the room, already measuring for new curtains. "We were thinking a soft sage green for in here, very calming, and we'll get rid of that heavy dresser. It makes the room look so small." The dresser was solid cherry, a gift from Marcus's parents for our 5th anniversary. I ran a hand over its smooth top. I see. Well, I'll leave you to it, she said, pushing off the doorframe. Take your time, we're in no rush. She left, her footsteps light down the hall. I continued packing. I emptied my underwear drawer, my sock drawer. I took my good jewelry case from the top shelf of the closet. With each item placed in a box, I felt a layer of the life I had lived in this room being stored away. But it was not sadness I felt. It was a methodical dismantling, a necessary clearing of the stage. By late afternoon, I had filled the 3 boxes. I carried them one by one to the small bedroom at the back of the house. It had been Michael's room once, then a catch-all for storage. A single window looked out onto the side yard and the old oak tree. I set the boxes on the bare twin bed. I returned to the master bedroom. It looked wounded, with empty spaces on the shelves and gaps in the drawers. But the furniture, the bones of the room, remained. My work here was a performance, and for now, the performance required only a superficial retreat. That evening, after a dinner where Michael made strained small talk and Chloe smiled with benevolent victory, I waited. I listened to the sounds of them moving around in the living room, the murmur of their television. When I heard their bedroom door close, I went back to my father's desk. This time, I took out the fireproof lockbox from the bottom drawer. It was heavy. I carried it to the kitchen table and used the small key I kept on my personal ring. Inside were documents in neat, labeled folders. I removed them one by one. The warranty deed was on top. I unfolded it. The paper was crisp, official. This indenture witnesseth, it listed the grantees, Marcus Alonzo Jenkins and Alina Marie Jenkins, as joint tenants with right of survivorship. The date was over 3 decades old. Our signatures were there, his bold and looping, mine more careful. I touched the notary's seal, a raised circle of red plastic. Beneath it was the last will and testament of Marcus Alonzo Jenkins. I did not need to read it. I knew its terms. It left everything to me, outright and without condition. It named me as the sole executrix. There was no mention of Michael as an inheritor of the house, only a clause about a separate investment account to be held for him until age 35, which he had received, and I suspected had long since spent. The third folder held older papers, the original sales contract, the loan documents from a bank that no longer existed, each showing a payment stamp. My fingers traced the column of numbers, the steadily decreasing principal. I remembered the months we ate beans and rice to make the extra payment. I remembered Marcus working overtime at the plant, coming home with his clothes smelling of machine oil and his eyes tired, but proud. A memory surfaced, clear and specific. We were sitting at this very table, the papers spread before us. Michael was in his high chair, smearing mashed peas on the tray. Marcus pointed to the deed. "This paper, Ellie," he said, his voice low and serious. "This is the truth. Everything else is just talk. You hold on to this truth. No one can argue with it." I had held on to it. I had held on to it through his illness, through his death, through the long, quiet years after. I had held on to it while my son grew up and grew distant, while a stranger moved into my home and called my life clutter. I looked at the deed again. My name was on it, only my name now. The truth, as Marcus said. I heard a floorboard creak in the hall. I quickly but calmly gathered the papers, placed them back in the lockbox, and returned it to the desk. I picked up a dish towel and was wiping the already clean counter when Michael walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. "You're up late, Mom," he said, his voice hushed. "Just tidying," I said. He stood there, holding his glass, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It might have been guilt. It might have been pity. "About the room, I hope you know we just want you to be comfortable." "I am quite comfortable," I said, hanging the towel on its hook. "Good night, Michael." I walked past him, down the hall to the small back bedroom. I closed the door. The room smelled faintly of mothballs and old books. I opened the window a crack, letting in the cool night air. I did not unpack the boxes. I simply sat on the edge of the narrow bed and looked at them. The performance of compliance was underway. The audience was convinced. Now, behind the curtain, the real machinery could begin to turn. Alastair Daniels had his instructions. The documents had stated their truth. All that was left was to wait for the players to take their places on the stage they were so eager to claim. I turned off the lamp. In the dark, I did not feel like a woman who had been banished to a small room. I felt like a general who had willingly retreated to higher ground, the better to survey the battlefield. The small room was not a prison. In the clear light of the next morning, I decided it was an observation post. From its single window, I could see the side yard, the garage, and a portion of the driveway. I could hear the comings and goings. I unpacked only what I needed: a few clothes, my Bible, the photograph albums. The rest of the boxes remained stacked against the wall, a quiet statement that this move was provisional. I made my bed, the same narrow twin-frame Michael had used as a boy. The act triggered a memory. I was tucking in a smaller version of my son, his hair damp from a bath, his face serious as he told me about a dinosaur book from the library. This wall had held posters of athletes and musicians. Now it was bare, beige, waiting. The memory was a ghost, pleasant but faint, crowded out by the present reality. The sound of a measuring tape snapping back into its case echoed from the living room. I walked out to find Chloe in the center of the room, a notepad in her hand. She was eyeing the large bookcase that dominated one wall. "I think a media console would go perfectly here," she said without looking at me. "Sleek, maybe in a matte black. We can mount the television above it. All this," she gestured at the shelves crammed with books, photo frames, and Marcus's collection of historical biographies, "will have to be boxed up. It's very dense." "Those are my books," I said, my voice level. "And I'm sure the library would appreciate the donation," she replied, making a note. "Or we could just have a service haul it away. We need to modernize Aliner. This whole place feels like a time capsule." I walked over to the bookcase. My fingers trailed along the spines. There was a water-stained copy of To Kill a Mockingbird I'd had since high school. A thick medical text from Marcus's brief stint in nursing school. A cookbook splattered with gravy, its pages warped. Each one was a brick in the structure of our life. "This bookcase," I said. "Marcus built it. Right here in the garage, it took him 3 weekends. He was so proud of the dovetailed joints." Chloe glanced at the bookcase, her expression one of polite disinterest. "That's sweet, but craftsmanship has come a long way. We can get something much more functional from a store." She moved on to the fireplace mantel. On it sat a simple ceramic vase, glazed in a deep blue. It was the first thing Marcus and I bought together from a street fair the weekend we moved in. We had no furniture yet. We ate takeout on the floor, and that vase sat between us, holding a single dandelion he'd picked from the weedy yard. Chloe picked it up. "This is kind of cute, in a rustic way. It might work in a guest bathroom with some dried flowers." She turned it over, looking for a maker's mark. "Please put that down," I said. The words came out flat, a command. She looked at me, surprised, then set it down with a slight clink. "I'm just trying to envision the flow, Aliner. You have to edit to evolve." "I am not interested in evolving," I said. I picked up the vase and held it. The clay was cool and smooth. She sighed, a sound of profound patience. "Well, you can't stop progress. This house has so much potential. It's just buried under 40 years of stuff." She headed toward the dining room. "I'm thinking we knock out this wall. Open concept is essential for entertaining." I followed her. The wall she pointed to was not load-bearing. I knew that because Marcus and I had discussed doing the same thing years ago. We had decided against it. We liked the defined space, the way the dining room felt like a separate, intimate chamber for family dinners. We had painted it a warm gold. "We had Thanksgiving in this room for 25 years, I said. "All the leaves in the table, the smell of pies for days." "Sentimentality is a trap," Chloe said, tapping the wall with her knuckle. "It keeps you stuck in the past. Mike and I want to live in the present, and the present demands open, fluid spaces." Later that afternoon, the conflict moved to the linen closet in the hallway. I found her there, pulling items from the shelves and placing them in a growing pile on the floor. Old but clean towels, faded pillowcases, and on top of the pile, the quilt. It was a double wedding ring pattern, made by my grandmother from scraps of flour sack cloth and old dresses. The fabrics were soft from decades of use and washing. The stitching, done by lamplight, was tiny and precise. It had been on my bed, then on Michael's crib, then a fort for him on sick days. It smelled of cedar and faintly always of lavender. Chloe had it bundled in her arms. This is just a rag, honestly. The fibers are breaking down. It's probably full of dust mites. That is my grandmother's quilt, I said. I stood at the end of the hall, blocking her path to the stairs, where I assumed she intended to take it to a trash bin. It served its purpose, she said, trying to step around me. We'll get a new duvet cover, something hypoallergenic and stylish. I did not move. Put it back. She stopped, her eyes narrowing. Alina, we are trying to create a healthy, streamlined environment. This, she shook the quilt for emphasis, is not part of that vision. It's clutter, emotional clutter. The phrase hung between us. I thought of my grandmother's hands, gnarled from farm work, still capable of creating such beauty. I thought of the stories each scrap of fabric held, a church dress, an apron, a hem from a sister's gown. It was not clutter. It was a document. You are holding my history, I said, my voice low. Put it back on the shelf. Perhaps it was the absolute stillness in my posture. Perhaps it was the lack of any plea in my tone, only cold finality. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, with a frustrated huff, she shoved the quilt back onto a shelf, where it slumped in an uneven heap. Fine, keep your rags, but when we officially rearrange this closet, it will have to go. She brushed past me and walked away. I stepped into the closet. I lifted the quilt, folded it with care along its original seams, and placed it neatly on the shelf. I closed the door. That night in my observation post, I did not look at the photograph albums. Instead, I thought about nails. The nail Marcus had bent while framing the bookcase. The nail in the living room wall that had held our first Christmas stocking. The thousands of nails holding this house together, each one pounded in with a purpose, with sweat, with the expectation of a future. Chloe saw only surfaces to be painted over and walls to be demolished. She did not understand that a home is not a shell to be filled with trendy furniture. It is a record. Every scuff on the baseboard was a story. The year we moved the piano, the time Michael learned to ride a bicycle indoors during a storm. Every crack in the plaster was a chapter. The settling of the foundation, the vibration from the old oak falling in a hurricane. Her desire to erase it all was not just an insult to me. It was a violence against the record itself. It confirmed what I had known since the moment she spoke of favors. This was not my family reclaiming a space. This was a foreign force seeking occupation. I opened the window wider. The cool air was a relief. The plan with Alistair was legal, financial, a structure of paper and law. But that night it became more. It became an act of preservation. I was no longer just securing a house for an old woman. I was defending the integrity of the record. I was ensuring that the nails, the cracks, the quilts, and the vases would outlast the temporary vision of a woman who saw history as clutter. The calm I felt deepened, settling into something unshakable and hard. The stage was being set, not for her modern evolution, but for a lesson in permanence. The crisp brochure felt foreign in my hands. It was glossy, heavy with professional photography. The cover showed a smiling, silver-haired couple walking through a manicured garden, a modern building with wide windows behind them. Sunset Vista Senior Living was written in elegant, gentle script. Chloe and Michael sat across from me at the dining room table. It was Sunday morning. The table was clear except for that brochure. They had asked me to sit down for a family discussion. "We've been doing a lot of research, Mom," Michael began, his hands folded on the table. He looked at me with an expression of practiced concern. "And we found what looks like a wonderful solution, a real blessing." Chloe leaned forward, her face a mask of supportive enthusiasm. "It's not just any facility, Alina. It's a continuum of care community. Independent living now, with assisted living and memory care available on site if you ever need it. It's all about peace of mind." She slid the brochure closer to me. I opened it. The pages showed spacious studio apartments with neutral decor, a state-of-the-art fitness center, a dining hall that looked like a nice restaurant. Activities like water aerobics and pottery classes. It was sterile and perfect. "It's only 20 minutes from here," Michael added. "We could visit all the time, and you'd be with people your own age. You wouldn't be isolated out here." I turned a page, a photo of a group playing cards. "It looks very clean," I said. "It is," Chloe said, her voice bright. "And safe. No stairs to worry about, no maintenance. They handle everything. Meals, laundry, housekeeping. You could finally relax and enjoy your life." I looked up from the brochure. "And what is the cost of this relaxation?" Michael shifted in his seat. "Well, it's an investment in your well-being, but we've crunched the numbers. The sale of this house would more than cover the buy-in fee and provide a comfortable monthly income for you. You'd have no financial worries at all." "The sale of this house," I repeated. "It's the logical step," Chloe said, her tone softening into one of gentle reason. "This house is an asset, Alina, a big, empty asset that's a burden for you. By selling it, you're converting that burden into security and freedom. It's the responsible thing to do, for your own good." "For my own good," I echoed. I closed the brochure and set it down squarely on the table. "So the plan is to sell my home and use the proceeds to purchase an apartment in a senior living facility." "To secure your future asterisk," Michael corrected, a note of impatience entering his voice. "We're thinking of you, Mom. We worry about you here alone. What if you fell? What if there was a storm and a tree came down? This is a way for us to know you're safe." "While also acquiring this property for yourselves," I said. It wasn't a question. Chloe's smile tightened. "We would be managing the sale, of course, ensuring you get top dollar. And yes, the market is excellent right now. This neighborhood has become very desirable. It would be a shame not to capitalize on that. We could use the equity to build our own future and you'd be taken care of. It's a win-win." I studied their faces. Michael's gaze was earnest, pleading for me to understand his manufactured worry. Chloe's eyes were sharp, calculating, watching for any sign of resistance. They had constructed this narrative carefully. The concerned son, the practical daughter-in-law, the frail mother who needed to be saved from her own home. "What about my things?" I asked calmly. "The furniture, the books, the quilt." Chloe waved a dismissive hand. "We'd do a thorough downsizing. The new apartment would be much smaller, of course. We could keep a few sentimental items for you. The rest we could sell or donate. I've already looked into estate sale companies. They handle everything." I nodded slowly, as if considering. "And the timeline for this win-win scenario?" "We think we should list the house before summer," Michael said, gaining confidence from my apparent acquiescence. "The market is hottest then. We could have you settled at Sunset Vista by fall. They have a waiting list, but I spoke to the director. A cash buy-in from a house sale would move you to the top." "So I have a few months," I said. "To get ready, yes," Chloe said. She reached across and patted my hand. Her skin was cool. "Don't look so worried. We'll handle all the hard parts. You won't have to lift a finger, that's the whole point." I withdrew my hand and placed it in my lap. "A few questions for my own understanding," I said. "If you sell this house, who is the legal owner who signs the deed?" Michael blinked. "Well, you are, Mom, but we'd be there to help you. We'd get power of attorney to make it easier." "Power of attorney," I said. "I see, and the proceeds from the sale, would they go into an account in my name?" "Obviously," Chloe said, a slight edge in her voice. "We're not thieves. We set up a dedicated account for your care." "And who would be the executor of that account? The signatory on the checks to Sunset Vista?" "We would manage it for you," Michael said, his voice firmer. "To remove the stress, you shouldn't have to bother with bills and statements." I looked from one to the other. The full architecture of their plan was now visible. They would get me to sign over control, sell the asset, deposit the money into an account they managed, and then write checks to a facility that would contain me. The remainder, presumably a significant sum, would be absorbed into their lives. My house, my history, my independence, all converted into their capital, all wrapped in the language of care and favor. "I appreciate the research you've done," I said, my voice even and quiet. "It is a very comprehensive plan." Chloe's shoulders relaxed. Michael exhaled, a smile breaking through. "So you'll do it," he asked. I will think about it, I said. I picked up the Sunset Vista brochure. May I keep this? Of course, Chloe said, beaming. Look through it, imagine yourself there. It really is for the best. I stood up, the brochure in my hand. Thank you for the discussion. I walked back to my small room. I closed the door. I did not look at the brochure. I placed it on the desk, face down. The glossy paper was a prop in their play. My role, as they saw it, was to accept the new setting with grateful tears. I sat on the edge of the bed. The ultimatum had been delivered, not as a threat, but as a gift. For your own good. The phrase was a key that unlocked the final door of my hesitation. Any lingering filament of hope that this was a misunderstanding, that my son would remember who he was, snapped cleanly. They had shown me their endgame. Now it was only a matter of time before they saw mine. The calm I felt was absolute. The performance was nearly over. The next act was theirs to stumble into. I looked at the face-down brochure and knew, with cold certainty, that I would never see the inside of Sunset Vista. But I had a very clear idea of what their next home might look like. 3 days passed. The Sunset Vista brochure remained face down on my desk, a glossy monument to their assumptions. Chloe's mood was visibly lighter. She hummed in the kitchen and began talking openly about paint swatches and pre-listing renovations. Michael treated me with a gentle, condescending care, as if I were already halfway to being an institution resident. I performed my part, a quiet, contemplative woman, slowly coming to terms with her necessary next chapter. On the morning of the 4th day, I rose early. I dressed in a simple navy dress, the one I wore for church and important appointments. I made coffee. The house was still. When Chloe came into the kitchen, already dressed for work, she paused. You look nice, Alina. Doctor's appointment. No, I said, pouring a cup of coffee. I am expecting a guest this morning. A guest, her eyebrows lifted. Who? An old friend of the family, I said. He'll be here at 10. She seemed momentarily puzzled, then shrugged. Well, just make sure the living room is tidy. We have that realtor coming for a walkthrough next week, you know. She took her travel mug and left. Michael was already gone for the day. The house settled into its morning quiet. I washed the breakfast dishes. I straightened the cushions on the living room sofa. I did not touch the bookcase or the vase on the mantel. At 5 minutes to 10, I took a seat in Marcus's chair. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. The knock at the door was firm and precise. 3 measured raps on the wooden front door. I stood and walked to the foyer. I could see a silhouette through the frosted glass, a tall, lean figure in a suit. I opened the door. Alastair Daniels stood on my porch. He looked exactly as he had the last time I'd seen him, at Marcus's funeral, only his hair was more silver than gray. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, a crisp white shirt, a tie of deep burgundy. He carried a slim leather briefcase. His posture was erect, his expression solemn but not unfriendly. He was a man who carried authority as naturally as he breathed. Alina, he said, his voice a low baritone. He gave a slight formal nod. Alastair, thank you for coming. Please come in. He stepped across the threshold, his eyes taking a quick, professional survey of the foyer, the living room beyond. He had been here before, many years ago. He followed me into the living room. Would you like some coffee? I asked. No, thank you. I am here on business. He set his briefcase on the coffee table. It was the same table where the Sunset Vista brochure had been presented. At that moment, Chloe's car pulled back into the driveway. The engine cut off. I had not expected her to return. I saw her through the window, talking on her phone, gathering some files from her passenger seat. She was home for a forgotten document. The front door opened and closed. Alina, I just need to grab the... Her voice cut off as she entered the living room and saw Alastair. She stopped, the files clutched to her chest. Her eyes swept over him, the impeccable suit, the briefcase, his air of unassailable professionalism. A flicker of confusion, then suspicion, crossed her face. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company. Her tone was polite but sharp. This is Alastair Daniels, I said. An old friend and our family attorney. Alastair, this is my daughter-in-law, Chloe. Alastair turned and offered a curt nod. Ms. Jenkins. The use of my married name, not hers, was a small, deliberate point. Chloe's smile was brittle. Attorney, is everything all right? Before he could answer, the front door opened again. Michael's voice called out, Honey, did you leave the financial folder? I need the... He walked into the living room and froze. His eyes went from me to Chloe to the stranger in the suit. The color drained from his face. He recognized the name, if not the man. Marcus had spoken of Alastair Daniels often. Mom, what's going on? Michael, I said. This is Mr. Daniels. He's here to finalize some estate matters. Estate matters? Michael's voice was tight. What estate matters? Alastair unlatched his briefcase. The sound was a definitive click in the quiet room. He withdrew a manila folder with a legal blue backing. He did not sit. I am here in my capacity as executor of the Jenkins Family Trust, he began, his words clear and devoid of inflection. And as the legal representative of Mrs. Alina Jenkins, sole trustee and beneficiary of said trust. Chloe took a step forward. Trust? What trust? Mike, what is he talking about? Michael was staring at the folder. I don't know, Mom. Alastair continued, addressing me, but his words were for all in the room. Per your instructions, Alina, and in accordance with the terms established by you and Marcus, I have completed the transfer of the primary asset from the trust's holdings. The transaction closed as of 9 this morning. What transaction? Michael's voice rose. What asset? Alastair opened the folder. He held up a single sheet of paper with an official letterhead. The property located at 2147 Willow Lane, he said. This house. A dead silence filled the room. Chloe's mouth opened slightly. Michael looked as if he'd been struck. This house, Alastair repeated, was held in a revocable living trust, of which Alina is the sole grantor and beneficiary. As per her recent directive, the trust has sold the property. The proceeds have been deposited into the trust's account, which she controls exclusively. Chloe found her voice first. It was a shrill, disbelieving sound. Sold? You sold the house? You can't sell the house. We live here. Alastair turned his gaze to her. It was calm and impenetrable. You reside here at the sufferance of the legal owner. The legal owner was the trust. The trust has sold the property to a third party. The new owner takes possession in 30 days. Michael finally moved. He stumbled toward me, his hands out. Mom, what did you do? Why wouldn't you talk to us? Who did you sell it to? I looked at my son's pale, panicked face. I felt nothing but the cold, clean shape of the truth. I exercised my right as the owner, I said. You presented me with a plan for my future. I simply executed a different one. Chloe surged forward, pointing a finger at Alastair. This is some kind of trick. She's confused. You can't just sell a house out from under a family. We have rights. Alastair did not flinch. He placed the paper back in the folder and retrieved another. This is a copy of the recorded deed, showing the trust as title holder. This is the trust document, signed and notarized by Marcus and Alina Jenkins 22 years ago. This is the bill of sale from this morning. All are in order. Your rights, Ms. Jenkins, extend only to your personal belongings. You have no legal interest in this real property. He handed the bill of sale to Michael, who took it with trembling hands. Michael's eyes scanned the paper. I saw the moment he read the purchaser's name. His head snapped up, looking from the paper to Alastair and back again. His confusion was absolute. But this is, he stammered. The sale is legal and binding, Alastair stated. You have 30 days to vacate. The new owner has been generous not to require immediate possession. Chloe was breathing rapidly, her chest heaving. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw not contempt or pity, but raw, undiluted fear. You miserable old woman, you've ruined everything. No, Chloe, I said, my voice as calm as Alastair. I am simply no longer doing you the favor of letting you stay. The silence after Chloe's outburst was thick, broken only by the sound of Michael's ragged breathing as he stared at the bill of sale. The paper quivered in his hand. Alastair Daniels remained an island of calm. He gestured toward the dining room table. I suggest we all sit. There are details to review. Chloe whirled on me. I am not sitting down with this conspirator. Mike, say something. But Michael was still fixated on the document. He slowly walked to the table and sank into a chair, the bill of sale held before him like a map to a ruined country. After a moment of furious indecision, Chloe stalked over and sat stiffly beside him, her arms crossed. I took my usual seat at the head of the table. Alistair sat to my right. He opened his briefcase again and laid out several documents in a neat line. Let us be clear, Alistair began, his voice devoid of any emotion but professional clarity. This house was purchased by Marcus and Alina Jenkins in 1985. In 2001, they established the Jenkins Family Trust, a revocable living trust, for the purposes of estate planning and asset protection. They transferred the title of this property into the trust. The trust document names Alina as the sole trustee and primary beneficiary. Upon Marcus's death, her control became absolute. I never knew about any trust, Michael said, his voice hollow. You were not a party to it, Alistair stated. It was a private instrument between your parents. You were named as a secondary beneficiary of a separate investment account, which you received on your 35th birthday. The house was never part of your inheritance. It remained an asset of the trust to be managed by the trustee, your mother, for her lifetime, with instructions for its disposition upon her death. Disposition, Chloe snapped. What does that mean? It means, I said, speaking for the first time since we sat down, that I could leave it to whomever I wished, or sell it, as I have done. Alistair tapped a line on the trust document. The trust agreement grants the trustee full power to sell, transfer, or encumber any trust property at her discretion. There are no restrictions. Mrs. Jenkins contacted me 2 weeks ago to exercise that power. 2 weeks, Michael whispered, his eyes lifting to meet mine. That was before we talked about Sunset Vista. Yes, I said. You were planning this while you were packing your boxes, while you were just sitting there listening to us. The betrayal in his voice was raw. I was observing, I corrected him. You presented your plan, I assessed it. I found it lacking, so I activated my own. Chloe jabbed a finger at the bill of sale. Who is this buyer? JFD Holdings, LLC. Some shell company. This is a sham. JFD Holdings is a legitimate limited liability company, Alistair said, unperturbed. The purchase was for fair market value in an all-cash transaction. The funds have cleared. The deed has been recorded at the county clerk's office as of 10:15 this morning. It is legally irrevocable. But why? Michael's question was a plea. Why would you do this, Mom, to punish us, to leave us with nothing? You are not left with nothing, I said. You have your incomes, you have your belongings, you have the apartment you rented before you moved in here. You have 30 days to return to it or to find another place. That is more notice than you intended to give me. It's not the same, Chloe shouted, slamming her palm on the table. Our apartment is a dump. This is our home. We've been living here. We've made plans. You made plans for my home, I said, my voice cutting through her tantrum. You made plans that required my removal. You called my life's work clutter. You called my security a burden. You saw my equity as your stepping stone. You did not see me as the owner. You saw me as an obstacle. We were trying to help you, Michael cried. You were trying to remove me. There is a difference. I leaned forward slightly. You spoke of a favor, letting me stay. That phrase showed me the true landscape. You believed you were the benefactors and I was the recipient of charity, in my own house. That clarified my position. Alistair interjected with the cold math. The proceeds from the sale have been deposited into the trust. Alina, as trustee, controls those funds entirely. They will provide for her care, on her terms, in a location of her choosing. There is no financial obligation to either of you. And where will you choose, Mom? Michael asked, a bitter edge in his voice. Some fancy condo. You hate condos. That is no longer your concern, I said. Your concern is the 30-day vacate notice. The new owner is not obligated to allow you to remain, but has agreed to this courtesy period. I suggest you use it wisely. Chloe's anger seemed to collapse in on itself, replaced by a frantic calculation. We can contest this. We can get a lawyer. We can say you're not competent. Alistair gave a small, cold smile. I have on file a recent letter from Alina's physician, conducted as part of this transaction, attesting to her sound mental capacity. I also have decades of her meticulous financial records. Any contest would be lengthy, expensive, and almost certainly unsuccessful. It would also likely result in the new owner initiating formal eviction proceedings before the 30 days are up. I do not recommend that course. The finality in his tone extinguished the last flicker of fight in her. She deflated, staring at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. Michael looked at the bill of sale again at the name of the LLC. A slow, dawning realization seemed to break through his shock. JFD, he muttered. Jenkins Family D. He looked up at Alistair, then at me. You sold it to yourself. I said nothing. Alistair gave a slight, confirming nod. It's a holding company you control, Michael breathed, the architecture of the trap becoming fully visible. You didn't sell it to a stranger. You just moved it from one pocket to another, to get us out. To secure my asset from hostile occupation, I said, and to demonstrate in the clearest terms possible who holds the deed, who holds the truth. The truth was now laid out on the table between us, as solid and unarguable as the cherry wood. Their plans were brochures and talk. Mine was recorded at the county clerk's office. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been legally and permanently inverted. The room was very quiet. The only sound was the soft rustle as Alistair gathered his impeccable documents back into his briefcase. The lesson was administered. Now came the living with it. The click of Alistair Daniels' briefcase was the period at the end of the sentence. He gave me a slight, respectful nod. I will be in touch, Alina. The management company has the paperwork. They will handle the rest. He left, his footsteps measured and firm on the hardwood floor, then silent on the front porch. The door closed with a soft, definitive sound. The silence in the dining room was different now. It was the silence of an equation solved, the numbers settled. Michael was still staring at the spot on the table where the bill of sale had lain. Chloe was the first to move. She pushed back her chair so violently it screeched against the floor. This is not happening, she said, her voice a thin wire of panic. Mike, do something, call someone, a lawyer, the police, someone. He is a lawyer, Michael said, his voice flat and drained. He just showed us it's done. It can't be done. She stormed out of the dining room and into the living room. I heard her packing. 30 days to go back to that shoebox. All our plans, the baby's room. She cut herself off, but the slip hung in the air. I rose from the table and walked into the living room. She stopped packing, facing me with wild eyes. You hateful old bitch, you've stolen our future. I have reclaimed my present, I said. You have 30 days. I suggest you begin packing. The new owner is not responsible for items left behind. The new owner is you, she shrieked. Legally, it is JFD Holdings, and its management company will be enforcing the vacate date. I am merely a tenant here, like you. I will also be moving my belongings. I had already arranged for a storage unit. The house would be empty, then renovated, then rented to a quiet, vetted tenant. The income would flow into the trust. I would take a small apartment nearby, one of my own choosing. Michael wandered in, looking lost. Where will you go, Mom? That is no longer your concern, Michael. Your concern is your own household. Your lease, I believe, is month to month. You should contact your landlord today. The practicalities seemed to pierce his stupor. Our stuff, all our furniture. You brought it here. You can take it with you. I looked at Chloe. You spoke of downsizing and estate sales. The principles are the same. You have a month to decide what is essential and what is clutter. The word made her flinch. She turned and fled upstairs. I heard the slam of their bedroom door. The next few days were a study in contrasting energies. Chloe ricocheted between furious silence and bursts of frantic activity. She ordered moving boxes online. They arrived in a large, flat stack on the porch. She dragged them inside, the cardboard thumping against each step. She began in the living room, the room she had wanted to gut and modernize. She took down the abstract art prints she had bought and wrapped them in bubble wrap with rough, angry motions. She did not touch the bookcase. She did not go near the mantel. Those things were now part of an enemy fortress. Michael moved like a sleepwalker. He would stand for long minutes in a room, looking at a bookshelf or a window, then sigh and assemble a box. His packing was slow, inefficient. He packed books with heavy dishes. He wrapped glasses in towels without padding. I continued my own routine. I made my breakfast. I tended to the small patch of herbs by the back door. I read in my chair. I was a steady, silent witness to their dismantling. A week in, the reality seemed to solidify for Chloe into a more concrete desperation. She cornered me in the kitchen as I was washing a teacup. "You have to call it off," she said, her voice low and strained. "You can reverse a sale. Mike said it's your company, just take it back. We'll forget all this. You can stay in the back room. We won't mention Sunset Vista again." I turned off the water and dried my hands on a towel. The sale is not reversible. It is recorded, and I have no desire to stay in the back room. You'd rather be alone in some sterile apartment than have a family around you. "I am *alone, I said, looking directly at her. "I have been alone in this house since the moment you began planning my removal. The difference now is that I have a door I can lock and no one inside who considers my presence a favor." Her face crumpled, not into sadness, but into thwarted rage. "You're going to die alone because of your pride." "Perhaps," I said, "but it will be in a space of my own choosing." The physical evidence of their departure accumulated. Towers of sealed boxes grew in the corners of the living room. Tape guns hissed. The guest room, which Chloe had wanted as an office, was now a staging ground for packed belongings. The master bedroom, the site of their imagined nursery, was being stripped of their personal effects. The sight of their king-sized mattress leaning against the wall, the empty closet gaping, gave me no pleasure. It was simply the expected outcome of a calculated process. One evening, I passed by the open door of their room. Chloe was on her knees, pulling shoes from the bottom of the closet. Michael was placing a framed picture of their wedding into a box. He saw me in the doorway and straightened up. "We found a place," he said tonelessly. "A 2-bedroom on the south side. It's more than we wanted to pay. We move in 2 weeks." I nodded. "That is efficient." He just stared at me, a hollow look in his eyes. There were no more questions, no more pleas. The machinery I had set in motion was grinding forward, and they were now simply objects within it. Being moved from point A to point B, the consequences were no longer legal arguments. They were cardboard boxes, rental agreements, and the quiet, crushing understanding that the future they had mapped out on my floor plan was gone. The house itself felt different, lighter, as if it were exhaling a breath it had held for too long. The occupation was ending. The 2 weeks passed in a tense, methodical rhythm of packing tape and muttered conversations. Chloe had arranged for a moving truck to come on a Saturday morning. On the Friday evening before, the house was a maze of labeled boxes and bare patches on the walls where their things had hung. A hollow echo had taken up residence in the rooms. I was in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner for myself, when I saw Michael through the window. He was standing in the back garden near the old oak tree. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders slumped. He was looking at the house, not the garden. I finished slicing a tomato, washed my hands, and walked out the back door. The evening air was cool, carrying the smell of damp earth and the first hint of night-blooming jasmine from a neighbor's yard. I did not approach him directly. I went to the small stone bench Marcus had placed under the tree years ago and sat down. After a moment, Michael turned and walked over. He did not sit. He stood a few feet away, looking at the back of the house. The kitchen window, the door, the brick path he had helped his father lay one summer. "Chloe," at her mother, he said finally, his voice quiet, "finalizing some things for the move." I nodded, waiting. He was silent for a long time. The sounds of the neighborhood filtered in, a distant lawnmower, a dog barking, the rustle of leaves. "I keep thinking about that trust," he said. "Why didn't you ever tell me about it?" "It was not your business," I said. "It was a tool for your father and me. It was meant to protect the asset and simplify matters later. Telling you would have served no purpose. It would have made me understand, he said, a flicker of frustration in his tone. I thought the house would just come to me, eventually. That's how it works, right? Parents leave the house to their kids. That is a presumption, not a law, I said. Your father and I worked for this. We sacrificed for it. Its disposition was our decision, not an automatic inheritance. You received what we intended for you. You spent it. He flinched. That's not fair. It is factual. The money was for you to build a foundation. You used it for a wedding and a European honeymoon. That was your choice. He kicked at a tuft of grass. So this is punishment for not being more responsible, for not living up to your expectations. No, Michael, I said, my voice steady. This is the consequence of you and your wife attempting to evict me from my home. The two are separate. Your financial choices are yours. Your choice to see me as a tenant, as a problem to be solved, that is what brought us here. He finally turned to look at me. In the fatting twilight, his face looked younger, haunted. We weren't trying to evict you. We were trying to help. We thought it was a good plan. You never asked me what I thought a good plan might be, I said. You presented a solution that benefited you both financially and spatially. You called it a favor. You treated my life here as a temporary arrangement you were graciously extending. That is not help. That is a takeover. I'm sorry, okay? The words burst out of him, choked and sudden. I'm sorry we handled it badly. I'm sorry we made you feel that way. But did you have to go nuclear? Did you have to sell the house out from under us? You could have just said no. You could have yelled at us. A no you would have worn down, I said. A yell you would have weathered. You were committed to your vision. You believed you were right. Words would not have stopped you. Only action. Legal, irreversible action. So you don't trust me at all. It was a statement, heavy with defeat. Trust is not an abstract concept, I said. It is built on a pattern of behavior. Your pattern in this matter was clear. You listened to your wife. You avoided my eyes. You presented me with a brochure for a future I did not want. You asked for power of attorney. The pattern indicated that my wishes were secondary to your convenience. I could not trust that pattern to change with a conversation. He sank onto the bench beside me, not close, but sharing the same stone. He put his head in his hands. I wanted everyone to be happy. Chloe wanted this so much. She talked about the baby's room, about having space. The mention of a child, a potential grandchild I might never know, was a sharp, private pain. I allowed myself to feel it for a moment, then set it aside. Your desire to make your wife happy is understandable, but it does not require my unhappiness. It does not require the surrender of my home. You made a choice. You chose her vision over my dignity. Now you live with the result of that choice. And what about you? He asked, looking up, his eyes glistening. You win your house back, but you lose your son. You'll be here alone. Was it worth it? I did not initiate this conflict, I said. I concluded it. You speak of loss. I have already lost the son who would protect his mother. I lost him the moment he became a conspirator in her removal. What remains is a legal relationship and a history. Whether that history can be repaired is a question for much later. It cannot be repaired while you believe I owe you this house, or that I have wronged you by keeping what is mine. He was silent for a long time. The first firefly of the evening blinked in the deepening shadows near the fence. I don't know what to say, he murmured. You do not need to say anything more tonight, I said. Your truck comes in the morning. You should get some rest. I stood up. He remained on the bench, a solitary figure in the gathering dark. I walked back to the house. The kitchen light was a warm square in the twilight. I did not look back. The plea had been made. It was not the dramatic, transformative apology one might hope for. It was muddled, self-justifying, and tinged with regret. It was human. It changed nothing about the moving truck arriving tomorrow or the new locks that would be installed next week. But it placed a period on the emotional sentence. The hurt was named. The boundary was stated. The rest was just logistics. I closed the back door, locking out the cool evening and the unresolved figure of my son. The house waited, quiet and patient, for its next chapter. The moving truck arrived at 8 the next morning. It was a bright, clear Saturday. I watched from the living room window as two burly men in matching t-shirts began loading the boxes Michael, and Chloe had stacked in the garage. There was a practiced efficiency to their movements that contrasted with the tense, slow-motion drama of the past weeks. Chloe oversaw the operation, clipboard in hand, pointing and directing. She did not come back into the house. Michael moved between the truck and the garage, carrying lighter items. He glanced at the house once, his eyes finding the window where I stood. I did not move away. He looked down and kept working. By noon, the truck was packed full. The men secured the rolling door with a loud metallic clatter. Chloe signed something on the clipboard, then walked to her car. She did not look back. She started the engine and drove away, presumably to meet the truck at their new apartment to direct the unloading. Michael remained. He stood on the driveway for a moment, then walked to the front door. He let himself in. The house felt different with the bulk of their belongings gone, larger, emptier, but also lighter, as if a low-grade fever had broken. He found me in the kitchen, making tea. "They're gone," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the space. I saw. "I have the keys to the new place. I'm heading over there now." He paused. "I have my key to this house." He pulled it from his key ring. It was a simple silver key he'd had since he was a teenager. He placed it on the kitchen counter. The sound was a soft, final click. "Thank you," I said. He nodded, shifting his weight. "So, I guess this is it." "For now," I said. It was neither a promise nor a dismissal. It was an acknowledgement of the current fact. He opened his mouth as if to say more, then closed it. He gave one last look around the kitchen, his eyes lingering on the table where we'd had so many meals, where the Sunset Vista brochure had been presented, where Alastair Daniels had laid out the truth. Then he turned and walked out. I heard his car start and drive away. The silence that followed was profound. It was not the angry, charged silence of their occupation, nor the tense quiet of the packing period. It was a pure, neutral silence. The house was empty of them. I finished my tea. I washed the cup and put it away. Then I began. I went first to the small back bedroom. I opened the window wide. I took the 3 boxes I had packed as my performance and carried them, one by one, back down the hall to the master bedroom. I did not unpack them immediately. I simply placed them in the center of the room, a reclaiming of the territory. I walked through the house. In the living room, I righted a cushion they had disturbed. I ran a dust cloth over the bookcase Marcus built. I centered the blue vase on the mantel. In the dining room, I adjusted the chairs evenly around the table. In the kitchen, I wiped the counters. Their absence revealed traces of their presence. A faint scuff on the wall from a moving box, a shelf in the refrigerator now barren, a void in the garage where their things had been stacked. These traces did not upset me. They were simply evidence of a concluded event, to be cleaned or left as part of the house's ongoing history. By late afternoon, the silence had become comfortable, familiar. It was the silence I had known before they moved in, the silence of my own company. I sat in Marcus's chair. The sun slanted through the west-facing window, painting a warm rectangle on the hardwood floor. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax fully. The vigilance could end. A wave of fatigue passed through me, not unpleasant, like the ache after completing a long, difficult task. And with it, a pang of loss, sharp and clear. I had won the house, but the family I had imagined sharing it with was fractured, perhaps beyond repair. I allowed the feeling to exist. I did not fight it. I observed it as I had observed everything else. Then I let it pass. When the feeling receded, what remained was a solid, steady sense of peace. It was not happiness, exactly. It was the peace of integrity. My actions had matched my principles. My boundaries were secured. I was alone, but I was free. I stood up. There was work to do, a new rhythm to establish. I went to the hall phone, the old landline with a long cord. I dialed a number from memory. It rang 4 times before a cheerful voice answered. "Hello." "Maggie," I said. "It's Alina." "Ellie, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up over there?" Maggie was from my church, a widow of 10 years who lived 3 streets over. We had a standing monthly lunch that had lapsed during the recent tensions. "I am well," I said. "The house is quiet again. I wondered if you might like to come for lunch next Sunday. I'm thinking of making my chicken and dumplings." There was a slight pause on the line, a quick intake of breath. Maggie was no fool. She knew about the struggles with Michael and Chloe. Her voice softened with warmth and understanding. "I would love that, Ellie. I'll bring a pie. What time?" We settled on 1 o'clock. After I hung up, I made one more call to Ruth, another friend from the book club that had disbanded when Chloe's criticism of my clutter had made me reluctant to have people over. Ruth was equally pleased to accept. I returned to the master bedroom. I opened the first box. I lifted out my photograph albums and placed them on the bedside table. I hung my clothes back in the closet. I spread my grandmother's quilt over the bed, smoothing its soft, familiar surface. The room was mine again. The house was mine again. The future, for the first time in a long time, felt like my own to design, one quiet, deliberate choice at a time. The keys to that future were no longer on my kitchen counter. They were in my hands, and I knew exactly what doors they would open. The Sunday lunch was a quiet success. Maggie's apple pie was perfectly tart, and Ruth's laughter filled the dining room in a way that didn't feel like an invasion, but a restoration. We did not speak of Michael or Chloe. We spoke of books, of Maggie's garden, of an upcoming concert at the community center. The conversation was light, undemanding. It was the sound of a normal life resuming. After they left, I washed the good plates slowly by hand. I put them back in the china cabinet, the one Chloe had deemed dusty and outdated. I looked at my reflection in its glass door. A woman in her early 60s, with striking gray and black hair, looked back. Her expression was calm. Her eyes were clear. A week later, a representative from the property management company contracted by JFD Holdings came by. A polite young woman named Lisa. She walked through the house with a tablet, noting its condition. She was professional, respectful. She explained the renovation schedule, fresh paint, updated fixtures in the bathrooms, refinishing the hardwood floors. She assured me the work would be done efficiently, with minimal disruption. I would temporarily move to a nearby extended-stay hotel that the trust would cover. The house would be empty for 6 weeks. "And after the renovations?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The property will be listed for lease," Lisa said. "We have a strict vetting process. Quiet professionals, no pets, no parties. The goal is a stable, long-term tenant. The rental income will be deposited into the trust account monthly." I nodded. It was the plan Alastair and I had constructed. The house would generate income. I would use a portion of it to rent a comfortable, modern one-bedroom apartment in a quiet complex a 15-minute drive away. It had an elevator, a community garden, and no stairs. I had chosen it myself. It was not Sunset Vista. It was a choice, not a surrender. The renovations proceeded on schedule. I packed a single suitcase of essentials and moved to the hotel. The work on the house was thorough. When I walked through it with Lisa after completion, it was both familiar and new. The bones were the same. The bookcase still stood. The floors glowed with their original honey color. The walls were a fresh, warm neutral. It smelled of paint and clean wood. It was my house, but also now a well-maintained asset. I felt no sadness. It was a practical transformation. I moved into my apartment. It was smaller, but the light was good. I placed my grandmother's quilt on the bed. I set the blue vase on the kitchen windowsill. I hung a few photographs on the walls. It was enough. The house was leased within a week to a retired professor and his wife. They were quiet, paid their rent on time through the management company, and tended the garden. I drove by sometimes, not with longing, but with a sense of stewardship. The record was preserved. The nails held. As for Michael, the silence persisted for months. Then, one afternoon in early fall, my phone rang. His number flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Mom," his voice sounded older. "Michael, I was just calling to see how you are." "I am well, and you?" A pause. "We're okay, the apartment is fine. Chloe, she's pregnant, due in the spring." I closed my eyes for a second. The news was a complex knot of emotion. I untangled one thread. "I congratulate you." "Thank you." Another pause, longer this time. "I've been thinking about what you said. About patterns, I'm trying to establish a different one. That is good to hear. I don't expect anything, he said quickly. I know things can't go back, but maybe when the baby comes, if you were willing to meet them. Sometime. No pressure. I considered this. It was not an apology. It was an offering, a tentative door cracked open. I would be willing to consider that when the time comes. Okay, that's good. He sounded relieved. I'll let you go. Take care, Mom. You as well, Michael. The call ended. It was not a reconciliation. It was a possible point on a distant horizon. It was enough for now. Today I am sitting in my apartment's small living room. The morning sun is warm on my lap. A book is open, but I am not reading. I am reflecting. The vengeance is complete. It was not violent or loud. It was administrative. It was the execution of a plan built on paperwork and patience. It reclaimed my dignity, which they had tried to list as an asset to be liquidated. I did not do myself a favor by letting them stay. I did myself a greater one by making them leave. The favor was in the reclaiming of my own authority. The peace I feel now is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of a hard-won order. My home is not a place on a map anymore. It is this feeling of unassailable autonomy. It is the quiet after the storm and the knowledge that I built the shelter that weathered it. The story is over. My life continues on my terms in the quiet, capable space I secured for myself. It is enough. It is more than enough. It is mine.